Today, we'll learn about some winter interests, but we'll also highlight a plant that was used by priests in the Middle Ages to stay chaste. We'll also talk about the reasons why I don't recommend planting boxwood. Welcome to the new era of GardenClips. Join us for our new, longer format, slower paced, deep dig garden clips. We're going to widen and deepen our look into the plant world. If you want more time, more detail, and your questions answered, stick around and hit that subscribe button because we are getting to work. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about winter interest. You know, there are two kinds of gardeners. Actually, there's many kinds of gardeners, but if we look at it in a binomial way, there are the gardeners who wait for spring and they're looking at their seed catalogs and they're getting a little anxious. They want to get this rolling. Another type of gardener goes out and has planted winter interest and is looking for winter interest in the landscape. This Christmas tree looking thing right here is the white fir, is hiding a secret. This plant is a little hard to establish, but after a while it will shoot up and give you years of growth. We don't expect it to grow 250 feet tall as it does as it can in its native range, but it does grow to be quite a stately and beautiful tree here east of the Mississippi. It is one of the trees that foresters used to avoid as being kind of a junk tree, but now they're finding that it's really valuable as a timber tree. It doesn't twist, and it takes a nail really well, and so they've been harvesting a lot of the white fir in the western United States. Three things you have to remember when you're planting this tree: that you have to have good drainage, you have to put it in full sun, and be patient with it. First, my experience with planting the white fir, Abies concolor, is that it will sit there for a couple years till it figures out, I can do this. And then about the third or fourth year, it starts shooting.
Why did you plant it here?
Okay, that's a good question. I planted this here partly to hide the telephone pole behind it, and partly because it has very good drainage. It's on a hillside, and it's in full sun. It gets full sun almost all year long. It's a prized Christmas tree as well. You can shape this very nicely, training it in the first few years and pruning it correctly. Get a nice little Christmas tree out of it. So if you're wondering when I planted this tree, it is 16 years old and it's doing really, really well. All the firs are evergreen, and it has this lovely gray, and sometimes there can be a lot of variation in the needle color, but gray, green. Sometimes you'll find a slightly blue cast on them, and they really take snow load very, very well. They're adapted to growing in mountainous areas where they get a lot of snow.
So I have a question about fir trees as opposed to pines, as opposed to spruces. Tell us about how you can tell the difference in what their needles are like.
Well, that's a good question. So when we're talking about pine trees, you will find that the needles are all in bundles. And those bundles can have 2, 3, or 5 needles in them. And the number of needles in those bundles are indicative of what species they are. In the fir trees, they are single needles coming out of the stem right here. And fir needles are flat. They won't roll in your hand, in your fingers at all. That's a fir. Spruces have triangular, sometimes there's more dimension, so they'll kind of roll in your fingers.
Eric, why'd you choose a white fir here instead of some other evergreen?
Here east of the Mississippi, the white fir is the most adaptable to our humid summer climates. For some reason, you can get other firs to grow, but the white fir outclasses all of them in terms of the growth rate and what they will do in the landscape. More hardy in our area.
Any final thoughts on the white fir before we move on?
You know, I will say this about winter interest. The things that during the summer, the floriferous spring and summer, when all the colors are out, and our eye is drawn to those beautiful colors, and the winter interest offers us a chance to appreciate the more subtle pieces of our landscape, like for instance, berries or exfoliating bark or a wonderful evergreen tree with a great shape and interesting color of needles. So we're going to talk some more about winter interest.
There's some winter interest right there in the greenhouse.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good thing to do in the wintertime.
Yeah, amen. If you have the wherewithal to build and maintain a greenhouse, there's nothing better. It's a great time of year for it. As the days are getting longer, everything in the greenhouse is starting to feel it too. They're gearing up for another growing season. Even in a greenhouse, it does get cold at night. There's no insulation. This is an old greenhouse, a Lord and Burnham greenhouse with single pane glass. So it does get chilly at night. You can see some burn of some of the green leaves against the glass where it got frozen.
That's a papyrus?
That's a papyrus. And so here's a subtle winter interest. These are the buds of a witch hazel. They're swelling already. Despite the cold weather, they are starting to swell. This thing will be blooming in another couple of weeks. See, now, that is a really subtle thing in the landscape. You wouldn't notice that in May. And you get a little bit of snow on those buds, and it gets very picturesque. And while we're standing here, look at this tree. I planted this tree. It's a 22-year-old tree. I planted this in the spring of 2004. This is a lovely native tree from southern Canada into northern Florida. The Betula nigra, the river birch, loves wet feet, loves it with plenty of moisture around its roots. By the way, I would never drill into a tree to put a name tag on like this. Although this is pretty well done. They have a spring in here and they can, as the tree grows, they can loosen this to allow the girth of the trunk to grow. But I mean, this is why we when we go to a conference and we get name tags, we use like safety pins. We don't like put a nail in our chest. This is just a root for possible, fungal infestations and all kinds of, and a label at the bottom of the tree works just as well, I think. Anyway, look at this exfoliating bark. That peeling bark is really a lovely winter interest. You wouldn't notice it in the summertime as much, but in this time of year, it is really popping. The birches have catkins. They don't really have flowers. They have male and female catkins that produce seeds, and that happens in the late spring, early summer, and then it's a lovely mid-green leaf through the summertime. It has a slightly silver underside, so when the wind blows, it gives you an interesting effect. And in the fall, it has a lovely yellow fall color. The river birch. I planted this the first year I was here at Marsh Botanical Gardens in 2004. So that is 22 years ago. It will often grow into a multi-trunk specimen like I did here. I just let it go. You can train it to 1 or 2 or 3 trunks, but this was so happy I couldn't touch it. This hillside coming down from Prospect Street here in New Haven, the hillside is full of underground springs. In fact, they built that Greeley Laboratory Lab right over a couple of springs, and but water has its way, and it will find a way down the hill. And so these trees are sitting on good underground water. So this river birch and the bald cypress, it's also a native tree, but mostly to the southeast United States, although it's perfectly hardy up here. The native range ends at Long Pond in Delaware, but there again, it's perfectly hardy here, and it is one of the 7 species of conifers that are deciduous. It drops its leaves in the fall. So if you move into a new house and you wonder why your pine tree dropped all its needles and you think it's dead, you better identify it first. If you want more time, more detail, and your questions answered, stick around and hit that subscribe button because we are getting to work. New, longer format, slower paced, deep dig garden clips. Here's another piece for your winter interest. These are the calyxes of the flowers of the chaste tree, Vitex agnus-castus. It is native to Eurasia, Europe, and Western Asia. They call it the chaste tree because in the Middle Ages, they used a tincture of this tree to suppress the sexual urges of priests. Well, there you go. They wanted to keep them chaste. That's a C-H-A-S-T-E. But this is a lovely plant that you can treat like a buddleia. It flowers on 1 year's growth. So you can cut these right to the ground. That's the way I do my buddleias as well. I cut them right to the ground, and then the flowers come out right at face level. It's wonderful. The flowers of Vitex are a kind of a blue. There's some variation, some silvery blue to violet to purple, and there's a lot of volatile oils in the leaves as well. And in fact, the leaves, it's a compound leaf that, interestingly enough, looks a lot like marijuana. This is a wonderful, I call it a subshrub because you want to keep it, you cut it down in the spring every year, plant it in full sun or dappled shade. It's growing under the outer reaches of an oak tree, but it does get afternoon sun here. Full sun would be best. Well-drained soil. This is a driveway to the main entrance to Marsh Botanical Gardens, and it's lined with these holly. There's several varieties of holly here, but most of them are the inkberry, which is Ilex glabra. A lot of people get Ilex, hollies, and Boxwoods confused. But the main thing about it is one has alternate leaves, the hollies, and one has opposite leaves, the boxwood. I wouldn't recommend planting boxwood anywhere in the landscape anymore. They have so many problems, from the boxwood psyllid, and there are several other insects and diseases. Nectria canker is a bad one. And if you want a lower maintenance operation in your formal garden, I would definitely look for maybe one of the Japanese hollies, Ilex crenata, to replace your boxwood. Got to do it, or you'll be spraying.
People like boxwoods because they're good for trimming and clipping into tight shapes. Can you do that with Ilex?
Not all Ilex take that kind of treatment. There are numerous species of Ilex, hollies, and also within each species there are numerous varieties. Again, as I mentioned earlier, if you want to do some clipping, you want a very formal look, then the Ilex crenata, the Japanese holly, is your best bet. So when you're looking at winter interest, you want to bear in mind that not everything is going to turn out roses. For instance, normally this time of year, this plant would be full of these racemes of yellow flowers. But the sub-zero temperatures that we had the other night blasted all of these flowers of the Oregon grape holly, Mahonia aquifolium. Now, if you look at these leaves, they look a lot like holly leaves, the American holly, and that's why the aquifolium. Aquifoliaceae is the holly family. Interestingly enough, these are not a member of that family. Normally, again, this time of year, you'd see these clusters they call, of yellow flowers. And then later in the spring and the early summer, you would find these wonderful purple-blue berries. It's a great plant, but this year, not so wonderful. Oregon grape holly, as it suggests, is the far west Oregon, mostly coastal Oregon and southern Washington. So it prefers a milder climate than what we got this winter. Normally, this does very, very well here. It's a wonderful evergreen for a shady spot. It does well in shade here in the eastern half of the United States. There are many different kinds of exfoliating bark. We saw the river birch with its kind of flaky appearance, hairy appearance almost. This is the Stewartia, one of my favorite small flowering trees. Look at the bark on this, how you can find kind of cinnamon colored and brown and gray. You can find, it's variable. It depends on the specimen, but you can find all those colors underneath that bark this time of year with Stewartia. Stewartia is a native of the Far East, Japan and Eastern China, and it's a member of the Teaceae family, what we get tea from. So it's in that same family. It has fragrant flowers in the middle of summer. You don't usually get that from a small flowering tree. You want to give it full sun, dappled shade. Light shade isn't a bad thing, but you also want to give it good drainage. You don't want it sitting in water. You want to plant it in good, fertile, well-drained soil. It grows to about 30-35 feet. It tops out at that, and its spread is about 20 to 25 feet wide, and it's a four-season plant, because in the wintertime you get this exfoliating bark. In the spring, the new leaves are kind of a purplish tint, and then in the summer you get those flowers. They're about this big, and they're white with a yellow center, and they're fragrant. And then in the fall, you get wonderful fall color. Often it's red, orange, yellow, purple on the same tree at the same time. The Stewartia, like the river birch, can be multi-stemmed, as we see in this specimen. In this one, it was trained into a single trunk, and there's a little sucker off the root coming up here. But this is a single trunk Stewartia. And again, slightly different bark color, but just great fall color and flowering in the middle of summer. Awesome tree. Can't beat it. Stewartia pseudocamelia. The common name is just Stewartia. We're looking at Abies grandis here. This is a fir that, again, is native to the far west of the United States, and this is a fantastic little fir tree. Look at texture of that gray foliage. First of all, the color of it is beautiful, but the texture of that foliage is like little bottle brushes. Awesome. There's the underside of the twig. This is a very slow growing plant. I planted this in 2014. So it's 10 years old. I planted it as a little plant, like maybe a 1.5 feet high. That's one thing I firmly believe in. Think big, but plant small. It's much better to plant a small specimen. It will acclimate to its situation much easier than a larger specimen that you've planted that will go through at least 1 year, maybe more, 2 or 3 years of transplant shock. So think big, plant small. Behind us, you may see in the background the demolition project. That is the old Winchester repeating firearms factory. It was built with walls thick enough to withstand cannon fire from Long Island Sound, which is about 2.5 miles away. It's where they made and boxed and shipped out shotguns, repeating rifles. All that material came through this building. And now they're tearing it down, and they've got some affordable housing and more upscale housing being built behind it. If you want more time, more detail, and your questions answered, stick around and hit that subscribe button, because we are getting to work. New, longer format, slower paced, deep dig garden clips. And let's not forget the herbaceous plants in our lives. During the summer, there's a lot of color here, a lot of members of the Asteraceae family. But if you leave them standing, the seed heads can be quite interesting, and the grasses start to show up in the wintertime a little bit more. They move in the wind. When snow lands on the seed pods of these herbaceous plants, it can be beautiful. It's a subtle thing, but something to think about for your garden. We're looking at the Daimyo Oak, which is a native tree in Japan. Its Latin binomial is Quercus dentata. And notice the leaves are still hanging on. It's not evergreen. It's what they call marcescent. So these leaves hang on almost all winter long. It's February now, and they don't know exactly why leaves hang on to. American beech trees do this too, and the white oak, many of the oaks do this as well. This is called marcescence, where the leaves hang on, and they thought for a while that the idea was to protect the buds from cold underneath. But I think that I'm leaning more to the idea that it's to protect the tree from browsing by deer and other ruminants. Because if they come along and chew on a leaf like this, it's like, oh, there's no nutritive value here. I'm just going to go find something else. The buds are where the real nutrition would be. So these things are protecting the buds by being kind of like the non-nutritive value of the tree. This tree doesn't get that big for us here in this country, but it does top out over 70 feet in Japan, where it's native. Here it is slow to medium growth and gets about 40 feet tall. Full sun. Let's see. Oh, here's a great seed pod. This is the Southern Magnolia. This is Magnolia grandiflora. It is a southern tree, and this is the spent seed pod. The seeds have popped out already. They are a bright red color. It's a great Christmas ornament if you can get it before the seeds pop out. And this is a tree that is native further south. You'll see a lot of these from Mississippi, Texas, Mississippi, Louisiana, through Florida, southern Georgia. But I planted it here against this wall to protect it from winter winds. Now, when we talk about evergreens in our landscape for winter interest, of course, there are the needled evergreens, which we talked about earlier, the pines, the firs, the spruces, and the hemlocks, of course. But then we've also mentioned the hollies, and then this tree are all what we call broadleafed evergreens. One of the keys to growing broadleafed evergreen successfully is to mulch it well in the fall, to plant it where it's protected from winter winds, and give it a little bit of as much winter sun as you can get. You can get away with planting a broadleafed evergreen in the shade of a deciduous tree, but it has to have some sun in the winter time because it's still photosynthesizing. You can see some of the leaves are showing winter burn because we had such a cold spell here. That's natural, they will fall off, but it looks like it's going to make it through the winter, and I think it'll even bloom this spring. Or it's actually a summer blooming. It'll bloom in the summertime, intermittently. Big, white, fragrant flowers. Oh, it's awesome when they bloom.
These were planted outside the White House. At one point, somebody tried to fly a plane into the White House. It was like a little Piper Cub type of plane.
I remember that.
And I think the magnolias saved the White House.
Yeah. All right. This is a plant. The genus is Aucuba, A-U-C-U-B-A. It's marginally hardy here. What happens with this plant is that on a cold night, during cold weather, its leaves will brown, they'll blacken, they'll stay on the plant. You think, oh, it's dead. But oddly enough, the next little warm spell you get, they pop out into this wonderful coloration. That's just fantastic. Aucuba does well in full shade. That's why I have planted on this corner. It's kind of the the west corner of this spot, and we've got a big oak tree to give it summer shade. Again, like all broadleafed evergreens, mulch it well in the fall, because the problem is they don't usually die of the cold. What they do is they die of thirst because the water in the soil is frozen. So if you can mulch it well and keep the ground somewhat thawed out through the winter time, it won't desiccate as badly as when it's not mulched. And also it's protected from winter wind. As I say that, there a little bit of a breeze is playing with it, but it's protected from the worst of the winter winds. This is a variety called Gold Dust, and I just love the plant. It is a native of the Far East, so it's not one of those plants. If you're into native plants, you're going to avoid this one, but in the right spot, it really pops in the wintertime, doesn't it? So we talked today a little bit about winter interest, exfoliating bark, the seed heads, and evergreen trees, shrubs. But you also want to think about things like grasses that have movement in the wind during the winter time. Although they're brown and the top is dead, it's still an interesting winter interest. You might also consider things with berries and things with red twigs, like the red twig dogwood. All of these add to the winter interest in our landscape. We really appreciate your viewing us. And this is the beginning of more of an effort to provide long form, what we call GardenClips deep digs. Follow us, grow with us, and please subscribe.